Our next speaker, we're going into the freshwater session now, is Bob Rode, Aquaponic Extension. Whose job is it anyway? Right there. I think he answered his own question, right? Send all your questions to him. Wow, it's Purdue.
I came up when Gary sent out the registration form and stuff. I think I was having a bad week about aquaponics, so that's where the title came from. How many people here have had to deal with inquiries about aquaponics? Okay, I kind of thought so. So basically, I'm going to talk a little bit about why aquaponics is so popular, what we've done, and some a little bit is. I'm hoping we'll have some time for discussion at the end. Okay, so why is aquaponics so popular? I think there's a lot of reasons, and I think it was Matt said it really is sexy. Some people are really jumped on this for who knows what reason, but some of the reasons seem to be it's sustainable and locally grown. There's a lot of emphasis on that now. Almost anybody can get into it. You can start with very small barrel systems all the way up to commercial operations. I think one of the keys to its popularity has been the availability of tilapia on a very small scale. There's a lot of little producers around. We have 5 or 6 small producers in Indiana who are just doing hundreds of tilapia fingerlings. Also, tilapia is hard to kill. So it makes it relatively easy for somebody to start and be successful with the fish part, which is usually the most intimidating thing. And I think also, they're not widespread, but there are getting to be more and more school programs where the kid comes home, tells their parents, the parents get interested, they can go to the school, they can see it, and most of these people, they kind of are a little leery about getting into it, but if they can see an example, it really just drives that interest that much higher. So I think there's a lot of reasons for the popularity. And one of the main things is there's a lot of information out there on YouTube how to do this stuff on your own. So there's not really a lack of knowledge in terms of that kind of information. So why is aquaponics so difficult? Well, I'll go into my sort of journey through aquaponics, but basically the technology is trying to combine 2 separate systems together. We have aquaculture, which is all about the fish and their water quality parameters, and hydroponics, which is about the plants, which is another set of water quality parameters, and trying to get somewhere between the 2. There's also marketing differences. So the plants that are marketed in these systems are generally sold on a very short-term basis. It's a 28-day to maybe 3-month or 6-month, if like tomatoes, growing season. So the marketing is very quick. Whereas most fish, you're going to be a year, year and a half before you have to market. Also, there's very big processing differences. And that goes even into regulations again. With the fish, you're going to have, if you're doing processed product, you're going to have a HACCP, FDA, depending on where you're marketing. With the plants, it's USDA, and especially now the new Food Safety Modernization Act regulations. So that's, again, 2 separate systems you're going to have to figure out. Also, most of these are going to be in controlled environments, and I don't know about anybody out there, but I've never worked with a greenhouse. A lot of these systems create a huge amount of humidity, and if you're in a building with lights, you've got another thing. So there's just more and more knowledge that's needed for these systems, aside from just raising fish and growing plants. So lack of knowledge to be successful is a real problem. It might seem easy when people get into it, when they watch those YouTube videos, but the amount of knowledge you need is pretty significant. So where can you get information? For me, anybody who inquires about aquaponics, I immediately send them to Riccosi's fact sheet through the Southern Regional Aquaculture Center. It's, I think, 16 pages. It's got a wealth of information. It's not a book, so it's not too intimidating, and yet there's a lot of information out there. There are other places to get information, especially scientifically based information. There's the Journal of Aquaponics. There are some colleges now, University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, Brunswick Community College are having classes. I've never taken one, but there are now quite a few farms giving trainings for a significant fee. How good they are or bad they are, I have no idea, but they're definitely out there, and a lot of people are taking advantage of them. There is a U.S. Aquaponics Association who has an annual meeting. I've never attended, so I don't know how well or how scientific the information is at that one. I do know that our USAS meetings, we do have at least one segment that's all about aquaponics, and is pretty good information. And then there are lots of YouTube things out there. Alan did the webinar. I think we see this coming in the future as more and more online information. So what did we do at Purdue? What this started, I didn't really think about how long we've been doing this. I'm guessing the inquiry started about 8 years ago and has become more and more significant as time's gone on. In order to understand this, we did a little fact finding, and I built a very small demonstration system to try to figure it out. Because it did sound like it was so easy, I was skeptical, as most people should be, and decided to do it myself and see how difficult it really is. And then based on the results of that, Kwamina and I, we had some money from a grant. We decided to do a couple videos, one of which, we were talking about, it was 6 or 7 years ago, and you talk about viewership, that is almost up to 1 million views now over a 6-year period. It's the hot topic. It's very popular, and we tried to. A lot of the information is based on Ricosi's recommendations. So it's gotten to the point where there's so much interest. We decided, the Indiana Aquaculture Association and Purdue decided to put on an aquaponics workshop last year. We held it in the fall. We had an attendance of about 75 people. I was really shocked. Probably half the people there are in the profession now. I thought it would be a lot of beginners. It was not. It was about 50-50 split. And I think we're probably going to have another one, not this year, but next year with a follow-up. And out of that workshop, that's when, whose job is it? I decided it's partially my job, but I think there is so many disciplines involved in this that you have to put together a team. And so that's what I've been working on in the last year. So at Purdue, we're lucky to have a pretty large agricultural department, School of Ag. And so I've been cultivating friendships and coordination and collaboration with a bunch of other people to try to get more and more of the science pulled in. So in our horticulture department, we have hired in the last couple of years a aquaponics faculty member. She does not have a research appointment. She does not have an extension appointment. She's research and teaching. But we do have a couple guys who are extension in hydroponics. And their emphasis within their department is being pushed toward controlled environment. So they really, we're working well together. The other thing I feel like is a long-term issue that we're not addressing, and as a fish head, it's not my thing, but we're putting a lot of moisture into buildings, and nobody knows how long they're going to last. When you do those business plans, you depreciate over X number of years. Well, if you are killing your building in 10 years, it's not going to be a very successful business plan. So I've been working with an ag and biological engineer whose forte is buildings, and we'll call them animal buildings, for lack of a better term. And then I have cultivated a relationship with a food scientist who's into food safety, because there are a lot of questions about the interaction of the fish, the water, and the plants. And in general, fish are thought to be safe because they're cold water organisms, but there's little scientific information out there. So we are submitting grants to try to work on those sort of issues. And then lastly, this only comes up after the fact, kind of like diseases and everything else. Pests can be a huge problem in these places for the vegetable crops. So I'm trying to I'm not quite satisfied with the entomologist I'm working with, but we'll get there. That's more, he doesn't know anything about aquaponics, so there's some education needs to be done there. So like I said, we're trying to cover all the bases of these operations because we do have commercial operations in the state. It's not just backyard people. And one of the things we tried to do on a national level, and there's a bunch of people in this room that are on these grants, is we tried to get a planning grant from USDA to try to figure out what stakeholders need in terms of future research. Okay, future research needs. So we put in a planning grant to USDA NIFA, that's the SCRI is Specialty Crops Research Initiative, so it's more the horticulture side. And we've done this now 4 years and have not been successful in any one. And we've tried to adjust and meet demands from the reviewers without much success, but I think we are getting close. The first year we had a heavily Purdue-dominated team, and also heavily aquaculture. So the review was, you're trying to do a national thing, get more states involved, more collaboration. Okay, great. So we did, in the second year, we went out and selected a lot of people to join us. We had a lot of people join in, and the PI on the project was Paul Brown, who's a fish nutritionist, and that was still kind of your true aquaculture. So the third year, we changed the PI. We had hired that Aquaponics faculty member. She became the PI. She went to DC and talked to, last night found out she talked to Gene Kim. So she tried to figure out, where do we fit in this? How can we get this kind of thing done? Because we really need the input from the stakeholders in order to figure out what research we need. So she got a lot of good information. She came back, we adjusted the grant, and this year we came very close to success, but one of the, well, I don't know that, we had lots of things we need to fix, but one of the reviewers still said it's too aquaculture. This is a crop grant. So the marriage of the two is really difficult to try to work with sometimes on the administrative level, especially anybody who doesn't understand the principles. It's really hard for them to understand what the interaction is. So that's pretty much it.